Ever sign a contract and think, man, I wish this thing could just handle itself? No more chasing down signatures or hoping everyone's actually going to play by the rules.
Yeah, I get it. That's the allure of smart contracts, right? But let's unpack that a bit. What's really going on under the hood beyond the buzzwords?
Yeah, good point. So we're diving into the how, the why, the what it all means for the future of agreements in general. And our sources, they paint a picture of, well, automated trust, amazing efficiency, but, and this is important, also some really, really thought-provoking challenges.
Exactly, and that's key. See, it's not about like AI taking over contract law or anything. It's more about using code, very specific code, to make agreements more reliable, more transparent. Think of it like this. Instead of relying on a middleman, a smart contract uses blockchain technology to automatically execute, those predefined terms.
Okay, so that blockchain element, it pops up a lot in these sources, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing for good reason, Rose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a smart contract, it's not just some like digital document, right? It's a piece of code living on a blockchain. So that means every action, every single change, it's recorded publicly,
Wow.
securely. And that's what makes them, tamper-proof, ideally.
Got it. And this tech, it's got the potential to shake up industries way beyond just finance, right?
Right.
One of the sources used this car rental example I thought was brilliant. So imagine this. You book a car online, the smart contract does its thing, verifies your payment, and bam, the contract itself sends you the key code to unlock the car.
Right. No more waiting in line, no more digging through paperwork at the rental counter. And it's not just about convenience either, right? Think about the security. The system can automatically verify your identity, even your driving history. Makes the whole process much smoother and way more secure.
Okay, so rental's over. The contract, it handles the return process, calculates any late fees, even processes your refund. Talk about efficiency.
Exactly. And this same principle, right? It can be applied to so many other areas. One of our sources goes deep on supply chain management. Smart contracts could streamline international trade, like massively, make it faster, more cost-effective, the whole 9 yards.
Instead of waiting weeks for paperwork to clear between all these different parties, a smart contract could, trigger the payment the instant a shipment arrives, like based on real-time data from sensors, GPS, all that.
It's all about automating that trust, getting rid of that potential for human error or, those frustrating delays. But, and this is a big but, this leads us to a point that I think gets overlooked a lot, especially in all the hype.
You're going to say they're not actually smart in the way we usually think about intelligence, aren't you?
Bingo. One of our sources put it perfectly. These contracts, they're only as good as the code that defines them. They can't think for themselves. They can't adapt to some crazy unforeseen circumstance or make a judgment call like a person.
Which makes the code itself absolutely critical. Because any flaw, even a tiny one, could have this huge ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine a logic error, right, in a smart contract that's handling, say, a real estate transaction. We're talking potentially significant financial losses, maybe even legal disputes.
Okay, yeah. The need for serious, thorough auditing is crystal clear. But before we get into the potential pitfalls, I want to back up for a second. Because one thing I found super interesting was just how old this idea actually is.
It's true. It seems like this new thing. But the idea, the concept of a self-executing contract, it goes back way before blockchain. We're talking the 1990s.
1994, to be exact. This computer scientist, Nick Szabo, he laid the groundwork. And this was long before the internet was even a mainstream thing.
It really goes to show you these seemingly futuristic ideas, they often have roots in research and innovation that's decades old.
It really makes you wonder, did Szabo ever imagine how impactful his idea would become, especially with, the rise of blockchain?
And speaking of blockchain, here's another layer to this, right? Smart contracts, they can actually exist on different types of blockchains, each one with its own quirks, its own strengths.
So, okay, the tech behind it might be different, but the core idea, it's still the same, right?
Yeah.
Using code to automate these agreements, make them ideally more trustworthy, but that doesn't mean they're perfect, obviously.
Yeah.
Definitely not without their challenges.
Right, and one of the biggest ones, it comes from that very same thing we like about them, this whole immutability thing.
You mean once a smart contract is, deployed onto the blockchain, you can't really change it? It's set in stone?
Pretty much. Which, yeah, on the one hand, fantastic for security, for transparency, the whole point. But on the other hand, what happens when something unexpected pops up? Or you need some flexibility.
It's what's that saying? Measure twice, cut once.
Mm-hmm.
But the stakes are way higher here.
Exactly. One of the sources, they really hammered home the importance of, really thinking through those what-if scenarios right from the start, the design phase, because once that contract is live, there's no going back, no undo button.
So thorough testing, auditing, that's got to be mission critical,
Yeah.
especially with how complex some of these contracts can get.
No doubt. And it raises a fascinating tool. How do you future-proof something that's, by its very nature, kind of inflexible? It's a tough one, but developers, they're working on it, exploring things like, more sophisticated dispute resolution baked directly into the contract itself.
So you're almost like building in a safety net, even though the whole goal is for these things to basically run themselves.
Exactly. Finding that balance, right? Automation, but with the ability to, adapt when you absolutely have to. But even with the challenges, the potential here is huge. And it's growing all the time.
Yeah, we talked about, car rentals, supply chains, but Source 2 gets into a bunch of other use cases, real estate, for example.
Think about it. You could buy a property, and that entire transaction is handled seamlessly through a smart contract, verifying funds, transferring ownership, even paying property taxes, all automatic.
That would be wild for buyers, for sellers, everyone. Less paperwork, lower costs, faster process. And, speaking of revolutionizing industries, one that really stood out to me was healthcare.
Oh, for sure. Smart contracts, they could totally change how medical records are stored, how they're shared. Patients could access their own data easier. Healthcare providers could collaborate more securely.
And one of the sources talked about automating insurance claims. So the smart contract, it verifies your coverage, processes the claim, even releases the payment. No humans needed.
Exactly. Think about all that time, all those resources freed up for both patients and healthcare providers. They could focus on what really matters, which is, actual patient care.
And don't forget the transparency, less potential for fraud, right? Every transaction is recorded on the blockchain. Way harder to game the system.
Right. It's about building a healthcare system that's more trustworthy, more efficient. And these are just a couple of examples.
It feels like any industry that uses contracts, any kind of agreement, it could be impacted by this tech.
Oh, absolutely. And as it gets more sophisticated, as we figure out these challenges, we're going to see even more innovation. Just wait.
It's kind of wild, right, to think about how much potential this stuff has to reshape, so many parts of our lives.
Yeah, no, it really is. Makes you wonder, what about 10, 20 years down the road? What kinds of agreements will we be making that we can't even imagine right now because of this tech?
It's exciting. But like you said before, it's not just about the tech itself. It's how it gets used by us.
100%. And that brings up something I think really important, something that kind of sits underneath this whole conversation about smart contracts. We have to make sure these automated agreements, they're used ethically, responsibly.
Because we're talking about what? Encoding trust. Literally taking this idea of agreement and putting it into lines of code. So then it's well, who gets to write those lines? Who decides the rules? That's a big deal.
Huge. And as these things, smart contracts, as they become more and more, the norm, we got to watch out for bias. It's got to be fair, transparent, accessible to everyone, not just, a select few.
Democratizing access, right? Making sure it benefits everybody, not just certain groups or industries. Yeah.
Exactly. And that means we got to keep talking about this stuff, collaborating, thinking through the ethics every step of the way, being proactive, not just reacting after something blows up.
So we're not saying lawyers are going to be replaced by robots or anything.
No. It's more like, how can we use this tech to make things better, more efficient, more transparent, easier for everyone to, make agreements and trust that they'll be upheld.
Focus on what matters.
Right.
Collaborating. Building new things, creating value, and really knowing that the agreements behind it all, they're solid, secure, fair.
That's the future right there. And what we've been talking about today, this deep dive, smart contracts, they're complex, they've got their issues, but they offer a glimpse into that future, a future where agreements, they're not just static documents, they're dynamic, they're alive, they help us build trust, and they hopefully make progress possible.
And that's a future, I think, that's worth working towards. And with, like you said, careful thought, a real focus on doing this ethically, it's a future we can all help create.